Yeah, hello everyone. I hope everyone's having a really great day thus far. My name is Inês, and I'm here today to host this coaching and feedback workshop. So I currently work at Jagex as the head of player support, and in this position, I lead two different teams, the anti-cheating and the player support teams, and I oversee as well a few other functional areas within the department like recruitment. In total, I have 8-9 years of leadership experience in community marketing department. So not only player support, but also anything related to community management, social media management, etc. And yeah, since the beginning of my career, of course, you probably know that I had to deliver feedback. And coaching, I think, has become more a thing in the last few years, really. But it's definitely one of the most powerful tools that you have at your disposal when leading a team. All right, so let's then get started. What are we going to do today? We are probably already halfway through the introduction, but there's a few more bits I would like to go through with you. And then I plan to have a little overview of what's coaching, what's feedback, what are the main differences between the two. And most part of the workshop, though, we will be looking at some examples that in moments that I had to coach people or deliver feedback recently that I adapt to bring to you here. And yeah, hopefully we will also have time in the end for some Q&A. Anything you guys would like to know more of, or you guys would like to explore a bit more in depth, feel free to bring those questions. What's the goal of coaching and feedback? Most of you say it's empower individuals and teams, and well, the more or less the same percentage say drive positive actions. And we also have an option, and 19% of you say make individuals and teams happy. I would say the goals are definitely empower individuals and or teams to make sure they can make in the future their own decisions, and then drive positive action. You definitely want to get something out of your feedback and coaching sessions, and that's probably allowing people to come out of those with some actions and then putting it into place. Who should be proficient in delivering feedback and coaching people in a team, in a professional environment? Who do you guys think should be proficient in delivering feedback and providing coaching? In my opinion, everyone indeed. Absolutely, it's crucial, like Arden mentioned, for team lead seniors, whoever has especially line management experience and a vested interest on the results those guys will bring to the team and the organization. But I think there's a benefit for everyone to at least have the basis of delivering that feedback and providing coaching. All right. A little overview of coaching and feedback. Simply put, coaching is about asking questions and allowing people to come to their own conclusions, all right, by themselves. And feedback is about really telling people what you observed and what you think is not going as well. So coaching as such, coaching is more something you can do as a preparation for example, a piece of work you need to complete. It's thinking a lot about the future and the results that you want to get in the future during that work or that project that you, for example, are kicking off. Whilst feedback is more about, yeah, it's more about a corrective behavior. You observe something, you observed something in the past or currently, and you want a certain performance, a target, or a certain behavior to change, and you are very assertive, and you tell the person what you want to, what you observed and what you want to see, yeah, in the future. So again, coaching, a lot about questions. It's definitely inquiry oriented. Feedback, again, it's really about saying what you observed, having that your judgmental hat on sometimes, and being specific about what you want to have on a certain occasion. Now, why did I say in the beginning of this workshop that coaching is one of the most powerful tools we have at our disposal? Think about coaching. I think we can do coaching in most of the situations, first of all, even in the simplest things you can imagine. And think about coaching like training people's brains to think, all right? To solve their own problems, to find the solutions of an issue by themselves. And I can give you the analogy of going to the gym. When you are going to the gym, what are you doing there? You are, training your body to do some exercises. You are probably losing weight, probably gaining muscle. Yeah, so think about, and yes, the brain is not a muscle, but think about the brain as a muscle. You also need to kind of exercise the brain. And what you are doing with coaching is kind of, I don't want to say forcing, but kind of nudging the person you are coaching to think, yeah, to exercise their brains. Does it make sense? I hope it was a good analogy. And to me, the way I approach these things, because coaching, again, coaching and delivering feedback are different. And to me, the decision, sometimes you need to decide what do I do in this particular situation? Do I coach? Do I deliver feedback? How do I approach this? For me, there are two main things we need to think about when making that decision. The situation itself. Is it around behavior? Is it around performance, what you want to talk about? Is the situation time sensitive? So for example, does the project has a hard deadline that you really need to meet, or else? Is a certain process that you are, for example, designing critical for the organization? And then the person you are delivering the feedback or coaching. Yeah, what's that person's experience? What's the attitude towards change, new processes, etc.? The examples. I have about 6 examples to go through with you. And each of those examples have the situation, a little bit of a brief of the situation, and then the person that you will either be delivering feedback to or coaching. Now, situation 1. We have a new project in our department that has 5 milestones. So we need to complete that project. We need to go through 5 milestones, 5 steps. And this project we know needs to be completed within 3 months. Now, the person you will be coaching or delivering feedback to throughout this time, the time the project will run, first of all, is a subject matter expert on not only project management, but also the areas that compose that project. Joined the company a while ago, so 3 years ago. It's not a new person in the team, and is very self-aware. So when I say used to feel smart and fast and is self-aware, that means this person knows when he or she fails, yeah, and reflects on that usually, and will not do or make the same mistakes again. Okay, so based, and now it's the moment for you to go into Miro if you are still not there. Based on this situation and the person we are considering here, I will open a vote, and I would like you to tell me, what would you think we would end up doing in this situation? Would it be mainly coaching, mainly feedback, or something like 50-50? Alrighty, so 4 votes on mainly feedback, 2 votes on mainly coaching, and 2 votes on 50-50. Does someone who voted mainly feedback want to explain why?
It sounds like they're already going to be reasonably proficient in what they do if they're a subject matter expert. So therefore, yeah, I put feedback mostly.
Okay, cool. Who voted on, one person who voted on mainly coaching? What's your reasoning?
Yeah, I picked mainly coaching just because I thought it's inquiry based. So if they know their stuff, if you sort of check in with them earlier, it feels maybe a bit better than just like telling them off for something that they've already, they already, if they're self-aware, they know that why they failed. So that's why I picked mainly coaching.
Yes. This is the typical situation. Thank you, guys. This is the typical situation where I would do mainly coaching as well, mostly for due to the points that Paula mentioned here. So this person is a subject matter expert, right? You probably won't find a lot of mistakes from this person. You probably won't have that many moments to deliver feedback because the guy, first of all, knows what he or she is doing. Joined the company a while ago, so this person knows people, the people in the company. This person knows the processes. This person knows the company as a whole, and probably, in our case, the players, right? So, in principle, there wouldn't be a lot of problems that we would need to correct and deliver feedback to. So yeah, I think this is that typical situation where I would opt to use, or what I think, where I think we would be doing mostly coaching. Now, mostly coaching, one of the most common models you probably will come across is the GROW model. This model basically tells you the way you can structure a coaching conversation. Okay, so it stands for, GROW stands for goal, reality, options, and will. Yeah, and so in the first stage, the first thing that this model tells you to do to start a coaching conversation is identify the goals that the person being coached wants to achieve. All right, and then you have some questions here, some questions that you could start with or that will come up in that conversation. Yeah, and then reality check. You need to get at some point the version, their version on the progress that they are making. All right, and here you can also share firmly your version afterwards. Okay, so again, how are you progressing? What have you achieved so far? Are you facing any challenges? Are typical questions you can make in this particular moment. Then you have the moment where you explore options with the person. Yeah, you try to get some solutions. For example, there's a problem we need to fix. You try to get some solutions out of the person. Yeah, and how to make progress towards the goal that you already defined. You can share your expertise, if required as well after asking the questions. And then the last stage will ask people to define / commit to a plan of action, right? There's no point, if you are coaching, there's no point on you after a great and powerful coaching conversation. There's no point for you to end the meeting just saying the person, okay, now based on the conversation we just had, you will need to do A, B, and C. Now, let's have that person come up with that action plan, because then you will be able to have a much bigger commitment from them, all right, than if you tell them what to do. So that's generically speaking what the model says. I have an example here, and before we go into that, now you can share in any of these moments, especially reality check, options sharing, you can share your opinion feedback. There's no problem on doing that. Ask the questions first. That's my recommendation, because then you won't be influencing the person to think like you think. Yeah, you want the person to think by themselves and to come to the solutions by themselves, not to think like you think. All right, cool. Can I have a volunteer to go through these little, how shall I call it, speech with me? This is basically an interaction with, you know, me and a member of the team I lead. And the situation here, so the person, we are in the midst of delivering milestone 2, right? But there's a delay, or there's something that might impact that delivery in the timelines we originally planned. All right, that's the problem here. So who wants to go through these with me? Hi G, thanks for booking me in. What's on your mind?
I think the second milestone of the project is at risk.
Okay, last time we spoke, everything was on track. What's changed?
We had to add an unexpected task to the backlog after talking to legal about the project. It's high priority.
Okay, considering these, what can we do to ensure we meet the deadline for this milestone?
Well, I could ask A to help out with this new task, as she's quite good at it.
Cool. So let me just break it down. Sorry to interrupt. Let me just break it down. So first we define what we want to talk about. See, what's in your mind? That's prompting the person to tell me what the person wants to talk about in that particular conversation. All right. And so we right away find out what's the problem that we need to fix, or we need to figure out a solution for. Okay. And then some leading questions to find out what happened there. Cool. And then we start now going into the options, the solutions we have. All right. Now, true, she's probably tied up with that other project we started in parallel, though. Is there anyone else who could help?
I'm sure B would be able to pick it up quite quickly. I would need to brief him for milestone 3 anyway. This would mean having that conversation earlier than planned, that's all.
Sounds good. If he's not available, what else could we consider?
Maybe we can review priorities and see if there's something we can leave out of the scope.
What do you think there would be?
Well, X, Y, and Z are definitely up there priority-wise. My initial assessment is that it would be fine to remove T, as it was always a nice to have.
What would be the impact of removing T?
I'm unsure at this stage. Might affect retention slightly.
Okay, so I'm stopping now here again. You see options sharing, and I'm also challenging those options and having that person think, what are the impacts of such options? And here you can also say, as I said, right, the first option that this person G mentioned, it probably won't happen, right? So what's the alternative to that option? Yeah. Cool. So, okay, then how do you want to proceed?
I'll do some exploratory work on the impact of removing T. Should take me a couple hours max. With that, I will be able to assess if it's worth the effort of pulling B out of his current tasks. I will get back to you on that tomorrow.
Coolio. Is there anything else I can help you with?
Nah, all good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for participating. Really
No
good.
worries.
Okay, so this last piece was, or this last part of the conversation, again, was me asking the person, what do you now want to do? What's the action plan moving forward? All right, and there you go. Situation 2. All right, so we have a new game due to be launched in 6 months. And we know how timelines can change, but let's assume it's 6 months and it's unmovable. We are in the player experience department, yeah, and the requirements for player experience in order to deliver this game are to be still agreed, and afterwards do some planning, and then we need to execute upon that planning. And we know that player experience oversees a couple of functional areas like anti-cheating, player support, social media support, first line, second line, whatever it is. And now the person here is the person here is responsible for the delivery of these, these requirements. This person, in the end of the day, is responsible to make sure the requirements for player experience for the launch of that game are executed. But that person is not a subject matter expert in all areas. There's a lot of areas, impossible for the person to be an SME on everything. This person also joined the company very recently, so less than a year ago, very new to the company. However, the person knows how the gaming industry operates in a game dev perspective as well, and very smart and dedicated, right? So let's see what do you think you would end up doing? Okay, wow. Everyone is in agreement, 50-50. Who wants to explain their reasoning?
I'm happy to do it. I guess I think it would be 50-50 because it's someone who clearly is willing to do things. So I don't think they need that much hand-holding, and they probably would appreciate being coached, but also feedback, because we do need to make sure that what they're doing is actually good, because they're not an expert.
That's exactly it. You guys share my opinion on this one. Again, there's no right or wrong here, but I would, and in this particular situation, I actually spent maybe 50-50% of my time both delivering feedback and doing some coaching. All right. Now, these table here has some questions you can use in several moments of the game launch. It's based on the grow model. I wanted to bring this here to you today because basically to drive a point home. Models are good. You need to adapt them to the situation, to your coach, to your to the situation, to your own style, and to the person you are also talking to. All right. So there's no point on you knowing models if you then don't know how to adapt it to real life situations. Cool. So whilst here, the grow model really tells you how to structure a coaching conversation from beginning to end. In this particular part, it's some questions you could, in your coaching conversations, you could ask, broken down in several types of meetings that you would have with, say, this person responsible for the delivery. All right, so everything starts with a briefing and kickoff, as you guys know, and kickoff meeting, where we talk about goals. I always ask to ask people if they understand all the moving parts of the project. Again, there's a lot of stuff going on. And one very important thing, in my opinion, which sometimes we miss as managers, priorities. One of the first questions I ask people is, what do you think are the priorities for this particular project? Because push comes to shove, we won't be able to do it all sometimes, and people have to have, in my opinion, at least a broad sense of priorities in order to make decisions fast by themselves. Okay. Then during check-ins, again, you are checking in progress. You are asking the person if there's something at risk, if there are any problems, and what solutions can we find to fix those problems. Yeah. Another question I love to as a manager, as a line manager, as a leader, another question I love to ask, is your workload manageable? Yeah. This shows you care. And if you are a person who cares, you need to ask these questions to people. Then during deliveries and certain milestones, you know, this is the moment for people to reflect, to go back to certain situations and reflect on what happened. And if there's something they would improve. For me, this is extremely important because from my experience, we as human beings need to have a chance to reflect on what happened in the past in order to, again, understand what could have gone better, and so that we can also digest that, and in the future we know what we need to improve. But we need to allow that time for reflection. Otherwise, if you start moving from one thing to the next without thinking about what happened, probably you won't be learning as much for the future. Right? This is explained by neuroscience. Yeah, I cannot go into that too much now because I'm not an expert, but this is actually explained by neuroscience. And then in the completion of the project is more or less the same when you are trying to coach people, is about kind of having a little retrospective of the whole project. Yeah. And I like to go into, did you spot any areas for personal development that we can, you know, talk about in future meetings or so? Is there any learnings that we will need to carry for the future, etc., etc.? All right, example. No, I won't read these all. Yeah, I want to kind of make you kind of understand what does this 50-50 mean. All right, when you will be delivering feedback in some moments, coaching in others. So this is basically an email I sent to this person after a very important milestone was delivered. Yeah, the game went into closed beta. Yay. And this was basically an amalgamation of a lot of things, really. Stuff that we have talked about in the past, other things that came up recently, etc. So, but here it's quite easy for you to understand which part I was delivering feedback during the meeting and which parts I was actually coaching the person. So this is clearly feedback. When it comes to this comms section, was clearly feedback. And as you can see, I make the person kind of think about a couple of things when it comes to communication. Now, winning over stakeholders. Again, a lot about observation, what we observed, with a little bit of positive feedback as well. And then I go into coaching. How can you recognize in the way I write? How can you recognize that I actually was coaching in this part of this person? Well, I asked. Yeah, I asked you, and you mentioned something. And then you suggested, you pointed out, right? It's clearly here I was coaching this person. I was not delivering feedback. And the same for areas of expertise. Those are very little, words that I use when writing these emails after a meeting, where you can spot I was literally coaching or giving feedback. Okay. Let me just see. The only other thing I really want to land here in this particular example. Feedback and coaching are not mutually exclusive. Don't think that they are. Yeah, some of the most powerful coaching / feedback meetings I had with people, it's where we actually do both. Yeah, a bit of coaching, a bit of feedback. Don't think just because you are just because you go into a meeting with a person thinking, oh, I will be doing mainly coaching, don't think that you won't be able to provide feedback. You will. Yeah, and you can do feedback and coaching in the same meeting. They are not mutually exclusive. Situation 3. Now, we have to deliver training to non-native English speakers. They are part of our outsourcing team. This person had to spent already some time with our trainer to prepare, training materials that were needed for for those training sessions. And training in my team, player support, is very comprehensive and quite professional. Now, the person delivering this feedback, it was the first time this person was preparing the training materials and delivering the actual training session. This person in the past had minimal interaction with the person, the group of people he or she was training. And again, very dedicated, very smart, and in the past always demonstrated to be very forthcoming to feedback. All right, so again, let's do some voting. Okay, so now the room is a bit split. So mainly feedback or 50-50. Who voted for mainly feedback and wants to explain the reasoning?
So I voted maybe feedback because this person hasn't done this before, and so doesn't have a lot of experience that like they can make their own judgment call on, and so it's more important that they gain a lot of feedback on how they did and an outside perspective that they can learn from.
Okay, thank you.
I voted for 50-50. I think whilst this person has spent some time in training already, they might need some coaching, even just to get their confidence with that training. But as was just said, because this is their first time, they're going to want feedback at the end to learn and develop and grow that confidence and their skills.
Cool. So just to give you context, I was in the actual training session, in this specific training session, and yes, I needed to deliver mainly feedback. You could try coaching, all right? You could absolutely try coaching, but in this particular case, I decided in that situation, let me send this feedback. Okay. Now, for feedback, there's something called, and yes, I'm not inventing anything here. There's something called the sandwich feedback method. Why is it called sandwich? Because simply put, you basically start by delivering positive feedback, then you deliver your constructive feedback, the points you really want to land, and then you end with more positive feedback. Right? That's simply put, that's what this model says, this method says. Now, I don't love the model itself, so I adapt a lot of these models. And this is an example of that email I had to send. Right, so yes, I started with positive feedback. And then I wrote 3 points that I wanted to land with this person. All right, and then finished in a little bit a lighter note. all right, but not necessarily more positive feedback. Also, absolutely adopt these things again. All right, again, this person is very forthcoming to feedback. Probably wouldn't even need, you know, the positive feedback. He wouldn't get demotivated. But it's always nice. I think it's always nice for us to have some positive feedback to people. Don't focus only on the negatives, otherwise the risk that you will demotivate people will be quite high. And then when delivering feedback, be specific, yeah, with what you observed. Be, when you can, factual, right? And honestly, try to explain the why behind the feedback you are delivering. Let me see if I can find here a little example. There you go. So in this point, slow down and pronounce words very clearly. The reason why I delivered this feedback to this person was because he was delivering training to non-native English speakers. Yeah, and this is again explained by neuroscience. So I went a little bit into that. Yeah, I explained the why behind the need of being a little bit, speaking a little bit slowly and pronounce all those words clearly. Okay. And yeah, I think that's it for this example. And again, be specific with what you observed, be specific with your feedback points. You can throw in, you know, some examples, etc., etc. Those are the main tips when it comes to feedback. And situation 4 is the following. We have to design or conceptualize a process for whatever it is, yeah. And the process that the person created is way too complex, is absolutely over-engineered, sorry. That process that we need to put into place is actually critical, is considered critical to the team or to the department. And unfortunately, looking at what the person designed or conceptualized, you don't have anything positive to say. You just cannot think, you wrap your brain around it and you don't have any positive feedback to give. Now, the person is new to the team. You, due to, you know, new to the team, so you are a little bit unsure how this person will react to feedback. And the person, though, is experienced in creating similar processes in past companies the person worked for. All right. So based on the person and based on the situation, what would you do? Okay, the room is also split 50-50 and mainly coaching.
I'll explain mine. I said 50-50, just with them being new and not have anything positive to say. Like the coaching side, like get them to see, like come to their conclusion about maybe why this isn't the best way of doing something. And then also like setting them up for a better round next time. So that was my thinking.
Okay, good. Thank you for sharing it. Now, either or, guys. Either or. I don't have myself a particular preference in this type of situations. The only thing I want to say about this is when you just have a massive list of constructive feedback, you don't have anything positive to say, honestly, there's no point on going through it all in detail. I think if you decide to go to approach the situation like that, it will only get most of us demotivated. Even people forthcoming to feedback, if you only have a massive list of constructive feedback, whew, even I'm very forthcoming. I'm not sure how I would take it. Okay, so in these particular situations, how I decide to approach it is I focus on the results I want to see, and I reiterate any guiding principles that apply to this process creation. All right, and so depending again on whatever your decision is, either going through feedback or through the coaching version, these are examples of how those versions would look like. All right, how you would be able to focus on those results and on those guiding principles. So focus here now on the feedback version, right? I'm saying let's not add more complexities to the mix. I'm saying we need to try and simplify and integrate whatever solutions we come up with in the infrastructure we already have. Again, results and guiding principles, and give a little bit more context, yeah, on the process and what this process will do, and who are the users of this process. Okay, so and then I always throw a little bit of context as well on making people think a couple of things. Yeah. And then the coaching version. These are some of the questions that you could use if you decide to go for the coaching version. Yeah, I always like in these particular situations to start asking the person to guide me through the process, just to give the opportunity for the person to think out loud about it and see if the person will realize that it's way too complex and way too over-engineered. And then I ask questions around, productivity. Is it time consuming? More efficiency? Is step really necessary? Integrating existing processes. So basically, the topics are exactly the same as in the feedback version. It's just in the coaching version, you are asking the questions. Situation 5. In player support, we have these what we call curator roles. So curator roles are areas that are roles that look after some areas of player support. Example, social media support. Example, escalations. Example, workforce management and reporting. Whatever it is, there's a lot more to it. And what we do is we make people apply for these informally for these roles. And in this particular situation, the person was not accepted in the curator role he wanted. And this person has been collaborating with that team for a while, has been working towards the goal of being accepted in the curator role for the last year and has clear aspirator as well. So for me, I would deliver mainly feedback in this particular situation. And this is the typical situation where you need to deliver bad news, all right? Whether that is in a performance review kind of setting, or I use these to dismiss people, by the way. Apologies to bring such a delicate topic to the table. But yeah, this model was designed to deliver bad news. What is the model saying? Very briefly, you first introduce the topic, yeah, why are we here, and set the stage. You then talk, and here, very important, go straight to the bad news you want to deliver. Don't try to go around the bush. Don't try to explain the reasons just yet. Plain and simple, I'm here to inform you that the team has decided not to move forward with your application. Period. All right. Now, the model says you could deliver the feedback, you could explain the reason at this stage. I'm not a particular fan of this. I prefer to leave it to a little bit later. So what I do is after delivering the bad news right away, I let the person, I pause for a few seconds, I let the person absorb the news and handle that emotion, because there will be an emotional reaction at a certain level. Yeah. And after that, you are there to listen. So what I do is a few seconds to stop, absorb the emotion, absorb the news, and then I actually start asking the person, why does he think he was not accepted in this role? All right, and then it's where active listening comes in handy. You are now there to listen to the person, to what the person has to say. Okay, and this is exactly the stage where I deliver feedback. If the person, especially if the person doesn't realize by him or herself that the reasons why he or she was not accepted were A, B, and C, then I also lay down that for them. Yeah. And then, yeah, solve. It's about, thinking how to honestly solve whatever problem there is, whatever performance issues or whatever behavior issues the person needs to overcome in order to next time do better. All right, and achieve their goals. So here's a typical email that I sent after that feedback meeting. Yeah, you will have access to these. You can then read at your own leisure, don't worry. But again, straight to the point, listen, ask any questions if you need to, deliver that feedback, and then what can we do in the future to make sure we are successful next time. Cool. This is a little bit more, complicated. I know. Maybe not complicated. I think it's a little bit more problematic because we don't like to deliver bad news, do we? I don't personally. Okay, so the other thing to notice here is I always try to deliver this type of news in the most positive way I can. And that means paying a little bit of attention to the words I use. For example, if you then have the time to read this email I sent, I never used the word reject, neither during the meeting nor in this email. Never use the word reject, for instances. All right. And again, I think it's always nice for us to think about the future, to give some hope to the person, to make sure there are actions to follow this kind of conversations, so the person doesn't get completely demotivated. Yeah. That's always a nice touch, in my opinion. Okay, let's finish with this one. So far, guys, we talked mainly about performance, didn't we? Or most of this was based on performance. I think one of the most difficult situations to turn around are behavior. Always, for me, always behavior is one of those really, really hard things to do. So we have a behavior, we observe a behavior that we don't think is acceptable. What do we do?
So my thoughts on this are definitely first feedback, because they need to be told right away that this isn't okay, and in no uncertain terms, and to not not beat around the bush, which is something that you said earlier as well. I think coaching might come into it when it's like moving on to the next stage of like, so why do you think you did that? What are you going to do to stop doing that in the future? If the goal is to get them to stop it, then I would assume that they need to be involved in in working towards it proactively and seeing for themselves a reason to stop doing that.
Yeah, I'd say the same, Arden, by the way. Very, very good logic. Now, I've seen this done via coaching. However, for me, it's harder to turn behavior around with coaching. I think you need to be really confident on your coaching skills. Again, you need to know the person a little bit and understand if you should actually spend the time on coaching the person, and you actually have the time to spend on coaching this person. And the other reason why is feedback. It's very hard to be assertive when doing mainly coaching, in my opinion. And when it comes to behavior, I believe very harshly that we need to be assertive. If something is not acceptable, it's not acceptable, period. So we need to be very clear, in my opinion, on these kind of situations, that it is not acceptable and we need to change. Yeah, so the way you do that in the immediate is through feedback in these particular situations. But yeah, I've seen it done with coaching though. Now, there's a model that is called SBI-BI. So it's a two-step feedback model. And it basically tells you to do these in a certain way. So the first step is you tell the person the situation you observed. You tell the person the behavior that needs changing, the behavior that is not acceptable. And you then lay down the impact that such behavior is having on whatever it is, company targets, team environment, etc., etc. And then the second step is you lay down very clearly and very specifically what is the behavior you want to see moving forward, and what is the impact that such behavior will have in the future. Yeah, what will change? And a little note on impact, guys. Again, neuroscience or psychology coming into play. I mentioned you can approach this in two different ways. One is laying down impact on company / team targets, so performance, or laying down impact on people / team, or even the person itself. From my experience, the easiest way you will see a behavior changing is when you focus on the impact on people, because you are adding the human element there, specifically when you start talking about the impact the certain behavior is having on the person itself. Why is that? Because we as human beings are selfish, some more than others, but unfortunately it's part of our nature. We are selfish. All right. Of course, you also need to know the person and what motivates the person. We all have different drivers. We all have different motivators. So adapt to the person. Yeah. If you know the person and you know the person's motivations, adapt this kind of model to that. And always, logic is your weapon in behavior things, in my opinion. Always your weapon. So use logic to your advantage. All right, so the situation is we have a meeting where there's only one woman, and that person actually happens to be an SME. However, other people are talking over this person, and I assume that they are kind of dismissing whatever you have to say. What can also be the impact? Do you see, since you are a subject matter expert, what might be the impact in the company or the team?
The wrong choices are being made.
There you go. Okay, so then tell me, or you or someone else who would like to participate, how would we then approach this situation? What would you say to the people who are talking over?
I would ask to speak with them privately after the meeting, and I would be as upfront as I could dare to be, and say, in that meeting, you spoke over me, which made me feel dismissed. In the future, I would appreciate it if you could institute better policies within the meeting so that everyone has a chance to speak.
Okay.
I go for a, you did X and I felt Y. In the future, can we Z?
Can we Z? Impact. Don't forget impact.
Yeah.
So you you then started in the beginning saying, this is making me feel, you know, there's a knock-on impact on my confidence. Yeah. And we also kind of realize choices might be wrong here because I'm the actual SME, right? So impact, don't forget impact.
Yeah.
People will only understand, unfortunately, very unfortunately, if you talk about impact. One of the things you did very well there was you delivered feedback in I terms, didn't you? So you talked about, so first of all, you started very factual, right? Explaining what you observed. And then you talked about of what that made you feel. I felt extremely important, guys, because no one can tell you what you feel, period. All right. So especially confrontational people, if you start talking, you did this, you did that, you whatever, they again will wear that confrontational hat, probably getting defensive, probably might try to talk back to you in a very dismissive way again. If you talk about what you are feeling, the risk of this happening will be a little bit, you know, lower, because they are not feeling you are attacking them personally. Yeah, it's something that you are feeling. They cannot change that. They cannot change what you are feeling. So very good there. What questions do you have for me?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have advice on coaching people who are very shy? Because in my experience, I know shy people that are very, very good at receiving feedback and are very eager to immediately implement the advice that you give them. But when it comes to coaxing answers out of them and their own plan of action, they're very shy. And I then sometimes like make a suggestion to like move the plan along, but then what happens is that they'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds really great, I'll try that. I think, well, but I also want them to come up with their own things. So do you have any advice?
Okay, question for you. Them being shy, do you think they don't come up with the solutions when you ask because of a confidence thing, because they are shy, and because maybe they are not too comfortable to, you know, bring to you the ideas, because maybe they fear that, you know, maybe they fear that the solution they propose won't be good enough, or there's something else going on there? Or is it more a capability thing, or a creative thinking thing?
I think it might maybe be a thing of being put on the spot. And then not coming up with something in combination, also maybe with feeling like, you know, when you're talking to an expert and they ask you for your opinion, you're like, okay, but they will immediately be able to tell if it's right or wrong, even when it's a situation where there isn't a right or wrong.
Okay, cool. Now, You mentioned something, put on the spot. Yeah, might be because they are put on the spot, and maybe they are not able to think as quickly or as thoroughly as they would like to be thinking. What could be solutions for this if this is the reason?
Yeah, already it's now occurring to me because it was with someone that I was talking to directly. He was very shy, and then as we were sending messages back and forth, they got back to me about oh, they did this and they've decided to do it like this. So already in the conversation, maybe build in a already say, okay, so talk about it now, but then, you know, message me afterwards or take some time to think about it. And then we can maybe discuss over email, or you can send me your plan once you have thought of it.
Good. There you go. See, you found the solution yourself, Arden.
Well, because he coached me.
You saw what I did there? That's very
did.
good. Yes, it helps, especially with people who lack confidence, Arden, and everyone. They definitely don't like to be put on the spot, because sometimes we get, you know, our brain becomes blank for some reason. So it's helpful to break down that conversation. I think people need to start feeling confident on it's sometimes just saying it's fine if you don't have a solution right now, but I need you to think about, right? You start the coaching conversation by asking questions. If you are not getting anything out of this, you can always go into a little bit more leading, more prompting questions to see if there's a different angle you could use. But if you are still not getting anything out of it, there's no problem on just breaking down the conversation, right? And telling people, okay, think a little bit about that and come up with me with a solution or a plan later on. We will continue the conversation later on. Absolutely fine. Again, this will work if the project you are talking about is not time sensitive and probably not critical. All right, so always adapt and always think about these kind of things. You also mentioned another thing, Arden. Might be because you are the expert. And again, it's about confidence. Yeah, I think it's always important over time, you as a person who coaches, who delivers feedback, we need to create these safe spaces. A lot of people are afraid of failure, guys. Probably the most confident person will also be in certain areas afraid of failure. So we need to start building the relationship with the person, building a certain environment that allows failure, that doesn't punish failure, that yes, we will have serious conversations when we need to, but we are always coming from a good place. Yeah, and we are not just pointing fingers. That's how you build a good environment. That's how you build confidence in people. Okay, and again, these strategies, breaking down conversations, fine, absolutely fine.
Yeah, I just had a question about if people are really down on themselves, if there's a sort of good approach aside from like trying to encourage them to not be so sort of negative or like, oh man, I'm really terrible at everything and that's why I'm the sort of like negativity spiral and stuff.
Deliver positive feedback as well, Paul. Again, one of the points I mentioned is we tend to focus only on positive or negatives because we want results. And that's a very natural reaction in us human beings. We need to change that and make the habit when we see good things, start delivering positive feedback. So in Jagex, and positive feedback, do it in public. Yeah, deliver positive feedback in public, or I mean, praise in public, preach in private. It's a cliche. It's a cliche for a reason, right? And start making a bigger effort on delivering that positive feedback. It's very important, especially in new generations, millennials and Gen Z. They work completely, their brains are wired completely differently from Gen X, for example. Yeah, focus on positive feedback. That's my suggestion.
I'd love to say thanks. I initially thought that coaching and feedback were like absolutely different things. So I've learned a lot just about how what those terms actually mean.
Yeah, I mean, they are, in essence, they are different, yes. But again, you can integrate both, right? Like we saw. And a point I repeated, and I will keep repeating, not mutually exclusive. All right, you can have powerful conversations with people where you do a little bit of coaching and you deliver feedback. Right? I think important is know the techniques, adapt the techniques, and see what works best. Right? It's important to understand, because you will fail as well. As a coach, as a person delivering feedback, you will also fail. You won't choose or pick the right approach every single time. So it's sometimes it's a trial and error, really. And but again, think about situation that you are facing. Think about the person itself. And honestly, guys, the more you know the person, the more effective you will be at leading people, regardless of whether you are coaching, delivering feedback, just having a normal check-in and caring for their well-being, whatever it is. Yeah, knowing people is essential if you want to lead teams effectively nowadays. And in certain situations, guys, you can use either coaching or feedback and achieve the same results. So that's why this is so exciting for me. Yeah, there's no right or wrong. You can try different things. Don't be afraid of failure. That's how we learn the quickest. I fail every single week, believe it or not. And yeah, that's it from me. Thank you so much, guys, for investing your time. It's very much appreciated for investing your time on being here. And I hope, yeah, it was helpful and you have a very good rest of your week.